I'm often looking for something that is small, maybe kicks up a little bit of mud, so this is one of the little flies that I tie. I probably ripped this pattern off of 100 other people, so if you're here and you created it, I'm sorry. It's just basically almost like a little merkin with a little bit of a shrimp twist to it. So if you start out, I put two little bumps of thread on just to hold my lead eyes on there. I'm going to tie the eyes. I'm using a number 1 hook here. This is an SC15, I think, which is a Gamakatsu hook. And so I just kind of back and forth on the dumbbell eyes to give it some weight. This time of year, the fish are not necessarily feeding on the surface. They're not always feeding on the bottom, but I like a fly that can cover the water from up high, down low. So I give the flies a little bit of weight. And I start out by just tying on the eyes. Now I'm just going to carry the thread back. Just going to carry the thread back a little bit. Going to use a little bit of bucktail here. Just to give it some little antenna, little shrimpy look or feel. So I'm just going to lash down a little bit of this bucktail right here. And also the fly does use some hackle. Kind of gone back and forth on using, I used to use all synthetic materials, and I go through little moods. Now this one's got a little bit of natural stuff in it. And because I use some hackle, I like the bucktail here just to create a little spacer. It keeps the hackle from fouling on my hook point. A lot of times if you'll tie something down, you know, under your tail, if you're going to tie up material like so, it helps it from coming down and getting around the hook. A fouled fly, as you know, is a dead fly. I spend more time staring at the fly in the water looking to see if it's fouled than to see if anything's following it, seems like on my charters. So I take this, I use grizzly hackle here. It could be any color. This fly, I'm going to basically tie it in basically tan with a little bit of chartreuse. It could be tied in all black. It can be tied in all white. It can be tied in any kind of root beer, brown, natural colors to emulate a shrimp or a crab or some kind of little creature. I've tied them in all purple. It doesn't matter necessarily what you tie. So I'm going to lash down the grizzly on one side. I use 2. It could be more than 2 if you want. And then I'll do 2 on the other side. It's pretty creepy in here. It's dark. You guys are all staring at me, so please ask me some questions to bring the creep factor down. We can talk about anything. It doesn't have to be flies. Just something. Got some mood music. Thank you. Very nice. Like that. Well, it's a weighted fly. It's going to be you know, it's basically aren't they all kind of derivatives of a Clouser minnow? So it's going to hop. So your strips are going to be 18 to 24 inches. I'm not a big fan of the bonefish strip. Little, I don't like that. I don't think the fish respond to that. So pardon? Oh, there's my son. And the meadow. Am I back on?
Yeah.
Okay. Just drop a drop of glue on here. That's okay. Getting back to how I fish the fly. You know, this wouldn't be necessarily a pattern that I would throw you know, in 12 inches of water with grass on the bottom, because you may end up hanging up. Those types of situations, I like to go with something that's not weighted. But I used it today. I was fishing the Addison Bay area. The tide started to get up. It was about 2.5, maybe 2 to 2.5 feet deep. I needed a fly to get down just a bit. I could see a few snook and redfish roaming around on the bottom, and so we switched to from a fly that had no weight to a fly that had some weight, and we're able to catch some snook on it. So this is it's called Palmer chenille, or Palmer Estaz chenille, I guess. This flash. This is just going to give it a little bit of flash. I'm not a big flash guy in the wintertime. I don't think the flies need a lot of. They don't need a lot of bling. The fish are generally fairly spooky, and they're already on high alert. For those of you that have been fishing in the last couple of weeks, you notice the water's gotten pretty clear in a lot of places. So there's not a lot of flash needed. If it lands in the water near a fish, he's going to eat it. He'll see it. Now, if it lands 10 feet away, you could put, this could be a diamond ring. He's not going to see that. But if you make an accurate cast, they'll come find it. So you just lash down the end. This the Palmer chenille, for me, is just very simple. I can tie a lot of flies with this in a hurry, because all you got to do is just rotate your vise, if your vise does that, and you just kind of wrap it around here. I kind of keep it close. I don't need to put too much on it. Maybe I'll go around 3 or 4 times. Then I'll lash that back down and trim it off. Catch it a little bit right there. So it just adds a little color. In the winter time, a big part of my business is targeting redfish. It is all year long, but in the winter time, it's more specifically redfish, frankly, because a lot of the snook, they kind of lose their appetite and stuff like that. So the redfish is a more consistent catch for me. I personally feel like redfish really respond to chartreuse, whether it's with a fly, and that's why I did choose the chartreuse colored eyes, or a jig if you were spin fishing. Something with a little chartreuse seems to tip them off and get them in the feeding mode. So I like to add a little chartreuse to every one of my flies here. So we've got the tail. It's starting to kind of look like a little shrimp. A little bit of color here, and then what I would do now is just add a little bit of a body, and this is where it can kind of take on a lot of different forms. It can be somewhat like a merkin. It could be more of a shrimp. One of the materials I like is EP brush. Again, it's just very simple for me to work with. I don't have to spin deer hair and trim and cut and all these different things. Another thing I found, it was just a small piece of a zonker strip here. A cross-cut zonker strip works good. You can palmer it around the shank of the hook. I think for this one, I'll go with this EP brush, and just because that's such a small piece. So I don't like the little fuzz on the end. And basically, the EP brush, for those of you that tie, I'm sure you know about this, but if you don't, it just has a little wire going through it with all the EP fibers. It's just got a lot of life in the water. EP fibers are great because they are synthetic and they sink. They don't float. So everything near the head of this fly is going to be fake, which is going to take it down with the weight. The bucktail and the hackle are going to tend to float because they're natural. So if the fly was to land on the bottom, it would now sit. It'll sit like this. So all these little materials, you can actually fish this fly without moving it. Any questions? Anybody want to cheer at this point? Here we go.
I wanted to ask you, you had great success this year in the red snook. Love to hear a little bit about that, how that went for you.
About how we did it?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was the red snook tournament. The format with 3 snook and 3 reds each day. Okay, so let me backtrack here. I'll try to do 2 things at once. So I'm basically going to pull this over. I'm going to fold it over so that I just have one side of the material is spread out on the wire, but I like to kind of fold it over so now I can spread it and my material will stack down nicely. But that tournament, it's tough because unlike a charter where you're happy to catch snook or reds in any number, the size isn't always the critical part. It's just getting them. In the tournament, you're trying to catch the largest 3 snook and the largest 3 redfish that you can. Certainly, I mean, with a tournament like that, you kind of planned it out. We planned it out for days in advance. My team of anglers, I've had them for a couple years now, and they're fortunate enough to have won back-to-back years. They're both very good casters, Alan, and that has a big part. I mean, if you could be on a lot of great fish, if you can't make the cast, it's not going to matter. And these guys, they're very good anglers. They're hard workers, and I don't let them sit down for 8 hours straight. We basically keep the fly in the water. I have one of my guys is a 6'5", 300-pound young fella, and his father is not much smaller. I make the big guy get in the middle of the boat, and we keep both flies in the water the whole time. Unlike on a charter, I would almost never have two guys casting. It's really hard to do. But no, we focused this year on catching our redfish early. We had the same tides as we're having right now. I think it was on a full moon, or maybe it was a new moon. The tide got really high really quick. The first day we had south wind, and the tide came up so quickly that I was able to catch one redfish right off the bat. I went to my next spot where I kind of knew there was a nice group of redfish, and the tide was too high. I went to my next spot, and it was getting higher, and I thought, oh no, I knew we had missed the tide. For those of you that have fished with me, I like to fish specific spots on specific tides where I know the fish are going to be coming through and feeding. And what happened was the tide got so high that we kind of just ran out of places to go for reds outside of just throwing a fly along a shoreline, which isn't the most productive way, and certainly in a tournament where against competition, that's not really going to get it done. So we ended up catching a bunch of snook. I went in the backcountry. I knew where there was a bunch of snook that were this long. I went and caught 3 of them real quick so that at least we had those done, and we spent the rest of the day going to likely areas, fishing the outside bars when the tide gets up. I like to go on the outside islands, fishing on the hard bottom, and we fished our butts off for probably a good 3 or 4 hours, and all we had to show for it was an upgrade of a snook slightly. We would go from an 18-inch snook to an 18.5 to a 19.25, and we kind of just nickeled and dimed our way up to that kind of showing. We ended up in second place, and then fortunately for us, the weather was changing, and I know some of you fished in that tournament. The weather changed on Sunday. It was like a completely different day. We had a huge front come through. The winds were south at 15. They were north at 25 and Mach speed. And my guys were nervous because that's obviously, for fly fishermen, that's normally a bad thing. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to get down there because I knew that the water was this high, was going to be this high. And that's what I needed. We got in there. We caught 7 or 8 redfish in the first hour. We only needed 3. We were having so much fun, we couldn't leave. It just worked out perfectly. We went back. Frankly, we went back and wore out the little snook again, and we're able to just kind of upgrade the snook. But the redfish we had were enough. So, it's funny. It's an interesting thing with the tournaments. I do have a tournament background, so I've fished a lot of tournaments. I love the competition. Being a guide is a lot different because and I kind of enjoy the challenge that way too. I don't certainly get to make the casts, but trust me, I'm right in there with them. When the cast is in the air, I'm like really hopeful, and so I've enjoyed that tournament. I fished it when I was a kid. I fished it actually. Many of you know Stacy Mullendore. We had a lot of success. He was the guide. I was an angler, and then when I became a guide, I've been able to guide now with it for a few years. So I put the body on here, this EP material. My eyes, I wrap it forward. I'm just going to goop on some glue here because Ed said this is going to go for at least 1,000, so I'll add glue.